The wind sliced like a blade of ice. It found every crack in her threadbare coat, every hole in her worn-out jeans. Elara shivered, a tremor that started deep in her bones and shook its way to the surface. Her breath plumed in the frigid air, a ghostly white puff that vanished as quickly as it appeared. Like her hope, the city lights, usually a beacon of life and festive cheer on Christmas Eve, seemed distant and cruel. They blurred behind the unshed tears that froze on her eyelashes. Each twinkling fairy light was a tiny needle in her heart. She was huddled in the mouth of an alley, seeking refuge from the relentless wind, but there was no real shelter here. The brick walls seemed to sweat cold. The ground was a sheet of dirty, refrozen slush. Her car had died 4 blocks away. A final, sputtering cough, and then silence. The engine was as cold and dead as her spirit. No money, no phone, no one to call even if she had one. She had run with nothing but the clothes on her back and a few crumpled dollars that were now long gone, spent on a bus ticket that took her halfway to nowhere. This city was supposed to be a new start, a place where Marcus couldn't find her. Instead, it felt like the end. A church bell tolled in the distance, a mournful sound that echoed the emptiness inside her chest. Midnight. Christmas Day was being born into a world where she felt utterly, completely alone. She pressed her face against her knees, trying to conserve the last vestiges of her body heat. The cold was a physical weight, pressing down, wanting to still her. It would be so easy to just close her eyes, to let the quiet snow cover her like a blanket. A low rumble cut through the howl of the wind. It was a deep, throaty sound, the purr of a powerful, finely tuned engine. Headlights swept across the alley entrance, blinding her for a moment. The car slowed. It stopped. Fear, sharp and familiar, lanced through her. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage of ice. It was him. He'd found her. The thought was paralyzing. The car door opened with a solid, expensive thud. Heavy footsteps crunched on the salted pavement, slow and deliberate. She squeezed her eyes shut, waiting for the harsh grip on her arm, for the voice that dripped with venom and false sweetness. But it didn't come. Instead, a different voice spoke, deep and calm, with a warmth that seemed to defy the freezing air. "Ma'am, are you all right?" Elara flinched, curling tighter into herself. She didn't look up. Couldn't look up. The footsteps came closer. "You can't stay out here. You'll freeze." She risked a glance, peering through the tangled mess of her own hair. He was a tall man, broad-shouldered, silhouetted against the streetlights. He wore a dark wool overcoat that spoke of quiet wealth, but his hands were bare. They looked strong, capable. There was a faint smudge of grease across his knuckles, a detail so out of place it was jarring. He wasn't Marcus. The relief was so profound it almost made her sob. He took another cautious step forward, his movements slow, as if approaching a frightened animal. "I'm not going to hurt you," he said, his voice gentle. "My name is Julian." She said nothing. The words were frozen in her throat. He crouched down, bringing himself closer to her level, but kept a respectful distance. She could see his face more clearly now. He was a black man with kind eyes, etched with lines of concern. There was a weariness about him, a sadness that seemed to live just behind his gaze. "It's Christmas," he said softly, more to himself than to her. The word hung in the air between them. Christmas. A day for family, for warmth, for joy. A day that felt like a mockery of her entire existence. A strange question bubbled up from the depths of her exhaustion and despair, nonsensical and desperate. She lifted her head, her voice a raw, broken whisper. "Sir, do you believe in Christmas?" He blinked, clearly taken aback. He seemed to truly consider the question, his gaze turning inward for a long moment. The weariness in his eyes deepened. "I used to," he finally answered, his voice low and heavy with unspoken history. "My kids, they helped me try." He didn't elaborate. He didn't need to. In that simple, honest admission, she saw a flicker of a shared sorrow, a wound that hadn't healed. "Come on," he said, shifting his focus back to her. "My workshop is just around the corner. It's warm. You can have a hot drink, and we can figure out what to do next. No strings attached." She stared at him, searching for the lie, the trap. She had learned long ago that kindness from strange men always came with a price. A terrible price. But his eyes held no deception. Only a profound, quiet sincerity. and she was so cold. Slowly, stiffly, she nodded. Just a tiny dip of her chin. Okay, Julian said, his voice softening with relief. He stood up and offered her a hand. His hand was large and warm, the calluses on his palm a testament to real work. When her trembling fingers touched his, it was like a spark of life jumping into her frozen limbs. He helped her to her feet, his grip steady and strong as she swayed, her legs numb and weak. He led her to the car. It was a vintage machine, restored to perfection, its deep cherry paint gleaming even in the dim light. He opened the passenger door for her, and she slid onto the soft leather seat. The warmth inside was immediate, a blissful wave that made her skin tingle. Julian got in beside her, and the powerful engine rumbled back to life. He drove slowly, navigating the empty, snow-dusted streets. They didn't speak. There was nothing to say. He pulled into a private driveway, pressing a button on his visor. A large, unassuming door slid silently upwards, revealing not a residential garage, but a space that looked like a temple dedicated to the automobile. It was enormous, spotlessly clean, and filled with a mix of classic cars and modern supercars in various states of assembly. The air smelled of clean oil, metal, and polish. It was a workshop, but it was more pristine than any hospital she had ever seen. He parked the car and killed the engine. The silence that followed was peaceful. "My sanctuary," he said, a hint of pride in his voice. "Come on. There's a small office in the back. It's warmer." She followed him through the cathedral of machinery. He walked with a familiar ease, a man completely at home in his element. He led her to a glass-walled office furnished with a worn leather sofa, a heavy wooden desk, and shelves overflowing with books on engineering and design. He gestured to the sofa. "Please, sit." She sank into the soft cushions, the leather sighing under her weight. He disappeared for a moment and returned with a thick wool blanket, which he draped gently over her shoulders. The simple, non-threatening gesture of care was so foreign it brought a fresh wave of tears to her eyes. She fought them back. He then moved to a small kitchenette in the corner and began making hot chocolate, his movements efficient and quiet. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice still rough. He turned, a steaming mug in each hand. "For what?" "For this. For being a burden." He shook his head, a firm, definite motion. "No one who needs help is a burden. Especially not tonight." He handed her a mug. The ceramic was hot against her frozen palms. She cradled it like a precious jewel. "Thank you," she managed to say, taking a small sip. The sweet, hot liquid was a shock to her system, a wave of pure comfort that spread through her chest. He sat in a chair opposite her, nursing his own mug. He didn't press her for details. He didn't ask her name, or where she came from, or why a young woman was freezing to death in an alley on Christmas Eve. He just sat with her in the quiet warmth. He let the silence be a sanctuary. After a long while, he spoke. "The guest wing of the house is attached to the workshop. It's empty. You can stay there tonight. Get a hot shower, a real night's sleep. In the morning, we can talk." Panic flared in her chest again. A house. A room. It was too much. Too intimate. "I can't," she said, her voice trembling. "I have nothing. I can't pay you." "I'm not asking for payment," he said, his gaze steady and unwavering. "I'm offering you a safe place to rest. That's all." She looked from his honest eyes to the warmth of the office, then thought of the biting cold outside. She had no choice. She had run out of choices hours ago. She gave another small, defeated nod. He led her through a connecting door into a hallway that was a world away from the workshop. The floors were polished hardwood, the walls adorned with tasteful, modern art. It was a home, a beautiful, silent home. It felt empty. He opened a door to a bedroom suite that was larger than any apartment she had ever lived in. A king-sized bed with a plush duvet, an attached bathroom with a walk-in shower. It was luxurious and completely impersonal. "The bathroom is stocked with everything you might need," he said, remaining in the doorway. "There are some clothes in the closet. My late wife's, she was about your size. Please, feel free to use anything." He said the words "late wife" with a quiet reverence that was heartbreaking. It explained the sadness in his eyes, the emptiness in the house. "There's a lock on the door," he added, his voice soft. "You'll be safe here. No one will bother you. My children and I are in the main wing of the house." He was giving her control, giving her security. He understood her fear without her having to say a word. My name is Elara, she said, the word feeling strange on her tongue. It had been a long time since she had offered her name to anyone. A small, sad smile touched his lips. It's nice to meet you, Elara. Try to get some rest. He pulled the door gently, leaving it slightly ajar, letting her be the one to close it fully. She listened until his footsteps faded away down the hall. Then, with a shaking hand, she pushed the door closed and turned the lock. The click of the bolt settling into place was the most reassuring sound she had ever heard. For the first time in a very long time, she was warm. She was safe. She stood under the hot spray of the shower for what felt like an hour, letting the water wash away the grime of the street and the lingering chill of fear. She scrubbed her skin until it was raw, as if she could physically remove the memory of Marcus's touch, his words, his presence. In the closet, she found simple, elegant clothes, a soft cashmere sweater and a pair of comfortable lounge pants. They smelled faintly of lavender and a perfume she couldn't place. Wearing them felt like borrowing a ghost's life, but it was better than her own tattered clothes. Finally, she slipped between the cool, crisp sheets of the enormous bed. The mattress was a cloud, the pillows a dream. For years, sleep had been a battlefield, a place of nightmares and fitful anxiety. But tonight, wrapped in warmth and safety, exhaustion claimed her instantly. She fell into a deep, dreamless sleep. Elara woke to the soft gray light of Christmas morning filtering through the blinds. For a moment, she didn't know where she was. The unfamiliar ceiling, the weight of the heavy duvet, the profound silence. Then it all came rushing back. The alley, the cold, the kind stranger, Julian. A wave of shame washed over her. She was an intruder in this house of grief, a stray he had taken in out of pity on Christmas. She had to leave. She couldn't impose on his kindness, on his family, any longer. She dressed quickly and crept out of the room. The house was still silent. She followed the hallway back towards the workshop, thinking she could slip out the way she came in. As she passed the entrance to what looked like a large living area, she heard a small sound. A soft sniffle. Curiosity, and a deeper instinct she couldn't name, made her pause. She peeked around the corner. The living room was vast, with floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out onto a snow-covered garden. A huge Christmas tree stood in the corner, beautifully decorated but unlit. It felt more like a memorial than a celebration. Two children were sitting on the floor in front of it, a boy of about 8, and a girl who couldn't be more than 5. The little girl was the one who was crying, silent tears tracking paths down her chubby cheeks. She was clutching a small, red toy race car, but one of its wheels had broken off. The boy sat beside her, his arm awkwardly around her shoulders. He was trying to be strong, his expression a stoic mask, but his eyes were filled with a sorrow too big for his small frame. "It's okay, Maya," he whispered. "It's just a toy. Mommy gave it to me." The little girl sobbed. It was her favorite. Elara's heart clenched. She understood. It was never just a toy. Julian was nowhere to be seen. He was likely trying to give them space, or perhaps he was lost in his own grief. She knew she should leave. She knew she was intruding on a sacred, private moment. But she couldn't. Her feet carried her into the room before her mind could protest. The floorboards creaked softly under her weight. The two children looked up, their eyes wide with surprise and suspicion. The boy, Leo, immediately moved in front of his sister, a pint-sized protector. "Who are you?" he demanded, his voice small but firm. "My name is Elara," she said softly, keeping her distance, sinking to her knees to seem less threatening. "Your father, he helped me last night. I was just leaving." The little girl, Maya, peeked out from behind her brother, her tear-stained face a picture of curiosity. She was still clutching the broken car. "Can I see?" Elara asked gently, nodding towards the toy. Maya looked at her brother for permission. He gave a hesitant, almost imperceptible nod. The little girl shuffled forward and held out the car. Elara took it carefully. The axle had snapped. It was a simple fix, if you had the right touch. Her own father, a watchmaker, had taught her how to handle small, delicate things. It was a lifetime ago, another world. "My dad has a workshop," she said, thinking aloud. "He fixes everything." "Our dad fixes big cars," Leo said, a touch of pride in his voice. "Not little ones." "Sometimes the little things are the most important," Elara replied, her eyes meeting his. She looked around the room, her gaze landing on a small decorative box on the mantelpiece. Inside, She found a tiny eyeglass repair kit. It was perfect. She sat on the floor, the children watching her every move with rapt attention. With painstaking care, she used the tiny screwdriver to jimmy the broken axle back into place, securing it with a small piece of metal she leveraged from the kit itself. Her fingers, though still stiff from the cold, moved with a forgotten muscle memory. It wasn't a permanent fix, but it would hold. After a few minutes of intense concentration, she gently spun the wheel. It turned perfectly. She held the car out to Maya. The little girl's eyes widened in astonishment. She took the car, her small fingers tracing the repaired wheel as if it were magic. A slow, brilliant smile spread across her face, the first genuine smile Elara had seen in the house. Maya looked at Elara, then at her brother. Then she did something that shattered the remaining ice around Elara's heart. She launched herself forward and wrapped her small arms around Elara's neck in a fierce, trusting hug. "Thank you," she whispered into Elara's shoulder. Elara froze for a second, every muscle tense. It had been so long since anyone had touched her with simple, uncomplicated affection. Slowly, hesitantly, she wrapped her own arms around the little girl, holding her close. She felt a presence in the doorway and looked up. Julian was standing there, a tray with 3 mugs of hot chocolate in his hands. He was watching them, and the expression on his face was one of raw, unguarded emotion. The deep sadness in his eyes was still there, but now it was mingled with something else. Something that looked like wonder, and a fragile flicker of hope. She didn't leave that day. She couldn't. The unspoken invitation hung in the air, solidified by a child's hug and a father's grateful gaze. Julian offered her the guest room for as long as she needed, and for the first time, she accepted without protest. The days that followed fell into a quiet, gentle rhythm. Elara moved through the large, silent house like a ghost, trying to take up as little space as possible. She kept to herself, cleaning up messes that weren't hers, folding laundry she hadn't worn, tidying rooms she didn't live in. It was the only way she knew how to repay the immense debt of kindness she felt she owed. She never intruded, but she was always there. A quiet, steady presence. The children were the bridge. Leo, initially so guarded, slowly began to thaw. He would find her in the library and ask for help with his homework, pretending he didn't know the answer when she could see he did. It was his way of seeking her company without admitting it. Maya was her shadow. She would follow Elara from room to room, chattering away about her toys, her friends at school, her dreams. She would bring Elara drawings, brightly colored scribbles of their new, strange little family. A tall man, a small boy, a smaller girl, and a woman with long, flowing hair. In every picture, they were all holding hands. Elara learned their routines. She learned that Leo hated the crusts on his sandwiches and that Maya would only eat peas if they were arranged in a smiley face on her plate. She learned that Julian drank his coffee black and that he spent hours in his workshop late at night, not always working, but sometimes just sitting in the silence, surrounded by the engines that made sense to him in a world that often didn't. She was careful never to overstep. She was a guest, a refugee. She knew this fragile peace could be shattered at any moment. One night, a week after her arrival, she couldn't sleep. The comfort of the bed had become familiar, but the demons of her past still visited her in the dark. The phantom sound of Marcus's footsteps, the memory of his angry words. She padded down the hallway to the kitchen, hoping a glass of warm milk might calm the storm in her mind. She found Julian sitting at the large kitchen island, staring into a mug of what was probably cold coffee. The only light came from the small lamp over the stove, casting long shadows across the room. He looked up as she entered, not startled, just weary. "Couldn't sleep either?" he asked quietly. She shook her head, pulling her borrowed robe tighter around herself. "Bad dreams. I know the feeling," he said, his voice laced with a deep, familiar melancholy. She poured herself a glass of water and hesitated, not sure if she should retreat to her room or stay. "Stay," he said, as if reading her mind. "Please." She sat down at the island, a few stools away from him. The silence between them wasn't awkward. It was comfortable, shared. This was her favorite time of night, Julian said suddenly, his voice thick with emotion. After the kids were asleep, the house was quiet. We would just sit here and talk. About everything. About nothing. He didn't have to say who she was. Her name was Sarah, he continued, his eyes fixed on some distant point in his memory. She was light. She filled this whole house with light and laughter. When she got sick, it was fast. Too fast. The light just went out. He finally looked at Elara, his eyes glistening. Christmas was her favorite. She loved it with everything she had. After she died, I hated it. I wanted to cancel it, ignore it. But the kids, I had to do it for them, even if it felt like a lie. Every year, it's like reopening the wound. He took a deep, shuddering breath. This year has been different. Since you came. Seeing Maya smile on Christmas morning, really smile. I haven't seen that since Sarah. His voice broke, and he couldn't finish. Tears welled in Elara's eyes, for him, for his children, for the woman she would never know. And in that moment of shared vulnerability, a piece of her own wall crumbled. He told me I was worthless, she heard herself say, the words spilling out in a torrent, quiet but unstoppable. He said it so many times I started to believe it. That no one would ever want me. That I was broken. Damaged goods. She didn't say his name. Marcus was a specter she couldn't bear to invoke in this safe place. He liked to break things. Little things at first. A plate. A glass. Then bigger things. My confidence. My spirit. My hope. He made me feel so small, so powerless. I thought running was the only way. I didn't know where I was going. Just away. She finally looked at Julian, her own tears now flowing freely. I'm so scared he'll find me. That he'll drag me back into the dark. That he'll ruin this light you've given me. Julian moved from his stool and sat next to her. He didn't touch her. He just closed the distance between them. You are not worthless, he said, his voice a low, fierce anchor in the stormy sea of her past. You are not broken. You are a survivor. And you are not alone anymore, Elara. He looked at her, his gaze intense, unwavering. He will not find you here, he said. And it was not a hope, it was a promise. And if he does, he will have to go through me. I will not let anyone bring darkness into this house again. It was a confession, a bond forged in the quiet hours of the night, two wounded souls sharing their scars. In that moment, she was no longer just a refugee he had rescued, and he was no longer just a benevolent protector. They were two people who understood each other's pain, and they were beginning to heal. Together, the fragile peace lasted for 2 beautiful, sun-drenched weeks in January. The house began to feel less like a museum of memories and more like a home. Laughter echoed in the hallways. The scent of Elara's baking filled the kitchen. The unlit Christmas tree was finally taken down, replaced by Maya's colorful drawings taped to the refrigerator door. Elara found a purpose. She helped the children with their school projects, read them bedtime stories, and discovered a forgotten passion for gardening in the estate's dormant greenhouse. She was nurturing things back to life, both the plants and herself. Julian watched the transformation with a quiet sense of awe. He saw the color return to Elara's cheeks, the light return to her eyes. He saw the way his children blossomed under her gentle care. Leo was more open, Maya was more joyful. They were healing in ways he hadn't thought possible. He found himself making excuses to leave the workshop early, to be home for dinner, to hear about their day. He found himself laughing again, a real, deep laugh that came from his soul. He was falling in love. He knew it was too soon, too complicated. But his heart didn't care about logic. Then, the past came roaring back. It started with a single photograph in a gossip magazine, snatched by a long-lens camera. It showed Julian and Elara in the garden, laughing as they helped Maya build a snowman. The headline was cruel and speculative. Billionaire mechanic Julian Vance's mystery woman. A holiday romance or a rebound from tragedy. It was a small story, but it was enough. Marcus saw it. A week later, the storm broke. Marcus went to the press, not with anger, but with a well-rehearsed performance of a heartbroken, concerned boyfriend. He painted a picture of Elara as a troubled, mentally unstable woman who had run away in a state of confusion. He claimed he was desperately worried for her safety, insinuating that she was being held against her will by a powerful, manipulative man. He was charismatic. He was believable. The media latched onto the story. It had everything. A reclusive billionaire, a beautiful but fragile woman, a spurned lover. Headlines exploded. Vance accused of exploiting vulnerable woman, the dark side of a tech titan's charity. Reporters began camping outside the gates of the estate. Helicopters buzzed overhead. The sanctuary had been breached. Elara saw the first news report on television. She watched Marcus's handsome, lying face fill the screen, his voice dripping with false concern. The world tilted on its axis. The air rushed from her lungs. The floor seemed to fall away beneath her. The familiar, paralyzing terror seized her. The cold from the alley was back, seeping into her bones. She had brought this down on them. Her past, her darkness, was poisoning this beautiful, fragile new life. She was a contamination, a disease. She had to protect them. She had to protect Julian and the children from the filth that clung to her. She ran to her room, her mind a maelstrom of panic. She threw her few belongings into the small bag she had arrived with. The cashmere sweater, the lounge pants. They weren't hers. Nothing here was hers. She scribbled a frantic, tear-blotted note. "I'm so sorry. Thank you for everything. Please don't look for me." She was about to flee, to slip out the back way and disappear into the night, just as she had done before. But when she opened the door, Julian was standing there, blocking her path. His face was a grim, determined mask. He had seen the news report too. "Where do you think you're going?" he asked, his voice low and dangerously calm. "I have to leave," she sobbed, clutching the bag to her chest like a shield. "Don't you see? I'm destroying you. I'm putting you and your children in danger. He won't stop until he ruins you." "Let him try," Julian said, his eyes flashing with a protective fire she had never seen before. "You don't understand." "No, Elara. You don't understand," he interrupted, taking a step into the room, forcing her to step back. "Did you think I was so weak? Did you think I would let some lying coward threaten my family and just let you run away?" His family. The words hit her with the force of a physical blow. "You are not leaving," he said, his voice softening slightly, but losing none of its steel. "This is your home now. Leo and Maya, they love you. And I." He stopped, taking a deep breath. "I love you," he said, the words clear and true in the tense silence of the room. "I am not letting you go. We are going to fight this. Together." He gently took the bag from her nerveless fingers and set it on the floor. Then he reached out and cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs wiping away her tears. "You will not run from this," he whispered. "You will stand and fight, and I will be right here beside you." He wanted to make you feel powerless. "I'm going to show you just how powerful you are." He pulled her into his arms, holding her tightly, a solid, unshakable wall against the storm that raged outside. For the first time in her life, Elara didn't run. She leaned into him, and she prepared for war. Julian Vance had built an empire not just on his genius with engines, but on his meticulous, strategic mind. He was a man who saw every angle, who anticipated every move. When he turned that formidable intellect and his vast resources towards a problem, the problem ceased to exist. And Marcus was now his problem. He did not fight fire with fire. He did not sink to Marcus's level of public mudslinging. He fought with truth. He hired the best team of private investigators and lawyers money could buy. They weren't tasked with creating a narrative. They were tasked with uncovering reality. While Julian shielded Elara and the children from the media frenzy, his team worked silently, efficiently, in the background. They delved into Marcus's life with surgical precision. They found everything. They found the string of ex-girlfriends who told similar stories of charm followed by control, of emotional abuse and financial manipulation. They found the police reports that had been filed and later withdrawn under duress. They found the restraining orders that had been ignored. They unearthed his history of shady business dealings, the investors he had cheated, the debts he had hidden. Marcus had built a life on a foundation of lies, and Julian's team dismantled it, brick by brick. Throughout it all, Julian's focus remained on Elara. He knew this was more than a legal battle. It was a battle for her soul. He encouraged her to speak with a therapist, a kind, older woman who helped her find the voice Marcus had stolen. Slowly, painfully, Elara began to talk. She recounted the years of fear, the constant walking on eggshells, the way he had isolated her from her friends and family, the way he had chipped away at her self-worth until there was almost nothing left. Each word was an act of rebellion. Each memory shared was a chain being broken. The children were her anchors. They seemed to sense the turmoil, and they rallied around her. Leo would bring her cups of tea, and Maya would sit with her, holding her hand, a small, silent guardian. Their unconditional love was a powerful antidote to Marcus's poison. The climax came not in a courtroom, But in a press conference Julian called at his corporate headquarters. He did not stand alone at the podium. Elara stood beside him. She was terrified. Her hands trembled, and her heart felt like it was going to beat out of her chest. But as she looked out at the sea of reporters and flashing cameras, she felt Julian's hand find hers, his grip warm and steady. She looked at him, and he gave her a small, encouraging nod. He spoke first, his voice calm and authoritative. He laid out the facts, presenting the meticulously gathered evidence of Marcus's long history of abuse and deceit. He presented sworn affidavits from other victims. He exposed the lies, one by one, with cold, irrefutable proof. Then, he turned the podium over to her. The room fell silent. Elara took a deep breath, clutching the edges of the lectern. She looked directly into the cameras, into the eyes of the world that had so easily believed her to be a victim, a fragile, broken thing. "My name is Elara," she began, her voice shaking at first, but growing stronger with every word. "For years, I lived in fear. I was made to believe that I was weak, that I was worthless, that my voice did not matter. The man who told you those lies is a master of deception. But he made one mistake. He underestimated my strength. And he underestimated the power of true, unconditional kindness." She turned and looked at Julian. "This man," she said, her voice ringing with conviction, "did not take advantage of me. He saved me. He and his children showed me what a family is supposed to be. They showed me what love is supposed to feel like. It is not about control. It is about protection. It is not about power. It is about partnership." She faced the cameras again, her eyes clear and defiant. "I am not a victim anymore. I am a survivor. And I am done being silent." The past was not just defeated. It was annihilated. The media narrative reversed instantly. Marcus was exposed, disgraced, and soon facing a mountain of legal charges from which he would not recover. He vanished from her life, a ghost finally laid to rest. Elara was free. Truly, finally free. In the quiet aftermath of the storm, a new peace settled over the house. It was a deeper peace this time, not the fragile quiet of before, but the solid, confident tranquility of a family that had faced a threat together and won. One evening, a few weeks later, they were all in the living room. A fire crackled in the hearth. Julian was on the floor, helping Leo with a complex Lego creation. Elara was on the sofa, reading a story to Maya, who was curled up beside her, her head resting in Elara's lap. It was a scene of simple, perfect domesticity. Maya looked up from the book, her eyes serious. "Elara." "Yes, sweetie? Are you going to be our new mom?" The question was so direct, so innocent. It hung in the air, charged with all the unspoken hope in the room. Elara's breath caught in her throat. She looked at Julian, whose hands had stilled over the Lego blocks. He was watching her, his heart in his eyes. Leo looked up too, his expression mirroring his sister's hopeful plea. Julian stood up and came to the sofa, sitting on the other side of Elara. He took her hand. "That's what I was going to ask," he said softly, his gaze locked with hers. "Elara, you came into our lives like a miracle in the middle of the darkest night. You healed us. You healed this house. You healed me." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, velvet box. He didn't kneel. It wasn't a grand, theatrical gesture. It was an intimate, honest offering. "I know it's fast," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "And I know you've been through so much. But I can't imagine a single day without you. The children can't imagine it. We love you. I love you." He opened the box. Inside was a simple, elegant ring with a single, clear diamond that seemed to hold all the light in the room. "Will you marry me? Will you be my wife? Will you let us, officially, be your family?" He was giving her the choice. The power. Tears streamed down Elara's face, but for the first time in her life, they were tears of pure, unadulterated joy. She looked from Julian's loving face to the two hopeful children watching her, their entire world hanging on her answer. She didn't need to think. Her heart had known the answer for a long time. "Yes," she whispered, the word a release, a promise, a homecoming. "Yes. Of course yes." Leo whooped with joy, and Maya launched herself into Elara's arms, nearly knocking the ring box from Julian's hand. He laughed, a sound of pure relief and happiness, and wrapped his arms around all of them, pulling them into one big, messy, perfect family hug. The empty spaces in the house, and in their hearts, were finally completely full. 1 year later, Christmas Eve. The wind outside was just as sharp, the snow just as thick. But inside the house, there was only warmth. The living room was filled with the scent of pine and cinnamon. The massive Christmas tree was ablaze with lights, its branches laden with a mixture of elegant glass ornaments and clumsy, handmade decorations crafted by Leo and Maya. A fire roared in the hearth, casting a golden glow over the scene. They were getting married, not in a grand church or a lavish hall, but right here, in the home they had built together. It was a small ceremony, with only a few close friends and an officiant present. Elara stood by the fireplace, wearing a simple, cream-colored dress. It was one of Sarah's, a dress Julian had kept, and he had asked if she would wear it. It wasn't about replacing his first wife, but about honoring the love that had shaped him, about weaving the past into the fabric of their future. It felt right. Julian stood opposite her, his eyes shining with a love so profound it took her breath away. He wore a sharp suit, but she knew that under the cuff of his shirt, there was probably a faint, stubborn trace of grease. He would never stop being the mechanic who found peace in his work. Leo stood beside his father, a very serious and proud best man, clutching the rings in a small box. Maya, the flower girl, stood beside Elara, holding a small bouquet of winter roses. As they said their vows, their voices were low and steady, promises spoken not just to each other, but to the two children who stood as witnesses. Promises of safety, of partnership, of unwavering love. When Julian slid the wedding band onto her finger, it felt like the final piece of a puzzle clicking into place. She was no longer broken. She was whole. Later that evening, after the guests had gone, the four of them sat on the floor by the tree, opening one present each, a family tradition. Maya handed Elara a small, clumsily wrapped box. Inside was a bracelet woven from colorful embroidery thread. It was imperfect, the knots a little loose, but it was made with love. "So you always remember you belong to us," Maya said, her voice full of childish solemnity. Elara's heart swelled. She carefully tied the bracelet onto her wrist, next to the simple gold band Julian had given her. They were both symbols of the same thing: belonging. Julian watched them, a gentle smile on his face. He caught Elara's eye over the heads of his children. "Do you believe in Christmas now?" he asked softly, echoing the first words she had ever spoken to him. She looked at the warm, fire-lit room, at the two beautiful children who now called her mom, at the strong, kind, wonderful man who was now her husband. She thought of the woman in the alley, shivering and hopeless, a ghost in a world of festive lights. It felt like another lifetime. A different person. Love had healed her. Family had saved her. "Yes," she whispered, her voice full of a certainty that resonated deep in her soul. "I do, because sometimes a new life isn't something you find. It's something you build, piece by broken piece, until it is strong and beautiful and whole."